Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet. And it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 20 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again, absolutely free. You can also go to your app store and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, and if you choose to do that before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you choose to tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app. It contains the Reality Management Worksheet. It contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. You can also download from that page on the website a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one where people have been stepped through the worksheet process, and if you choose to use them, listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. And we hope people will do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. And if you have any of those to share with us, we would greatly appreciate you doing so. You can do that by emailing me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, and or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@yagain.org. That's whyagain.org. And if we get a question or a comment from you through the email or other form, we will address it on the internet show, and then as time allows, send you a notification about what day and time that occurred so you can listen back to the archives for your feedback or input. And greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because it makes it so much easier for us to live into our intention with this work. The intention we have with this work is to be of service, and that is just many, many times easier to do when we know how these things are landing for you. So feel free to chime in. If you are listening at live.nedl.com/mindshiftersradio, we're glad you're here. We're glad you're listening. And yet, in order to participate, you need to download the Needle app. It's NEDL. It's AI Radio Tuner. And if you choose to do that and download the app and sign in and then follow the show, anytime one of us goes live, you'll get a notification on your phone. And you'll also have then the capacity to either type in a comment or actually call in live. And again, we greatly appreciate whenever anybody does that, because it's so much easier for us to live into the intention of being of service when we know what's really working for you or how you might benefit. It's just like when we have the support groups on Tuesday and Thursday night, which are absolutely free, and you can join it through Zoom, absolutely free. All you need to do is go to the mindshiftersacademy.org website and check out the Tuesday group page or the Thursday group page and enter that information into your web browser, and you'll be joining us. And when we have those groups, we routinely ask, okay, after a bit of a check-in, how would you benefit tonight? What do you want to work on? Does somebody have a worksheet they want to do? Does somebody have a life situation that they want guidance to map out a worksheet process for? Or is there something in particular you would like to listen to or watch in a video from one of our favorite teachers? And we do that, I do that in every group, because that's the status that I have found to be the best way to have this interactive flow and then produce more good results for actually meeting people's needs. So, yesterday we had some callers, and that was lovely, and we were reading from Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Being Peace, and we had read the first 6 mindfulness training exercises, and we had just begun reading the 7th. And so I'll return to that unless somebody wants to share with us. And please remember to feel free to share, even if I'm in the middle of reading this book or doing a monologue. I view it as an additive process whenever anybody chimes in. So the 7th mindfulness training, as presented by Thich Nhat Hanh, is aware that life is available only in the present moment, and that it is possible to live happily in the here and now. We are committed to training ourselves to live deeply each moment of daily life. Now, as a sidebar, this echoes exactly what Way of Mastery says over and over again. At one point it says, we'd like you to know that you think about your ordinary daily life experiences. And the Way of Mastery says there's no such thing as an ordinary moment. And it says, your life, your very life, when you get up in the morning, has placed you in the most perfect learning school to move your life forward, the most perfect ashram you could ever have. You don't need to go off to the Himalayas. You don't need to search out a guru. As life unfolds in front of you and around you and you interact with it, lessons are being presented. And you can only live fully in the present moment. If you're worried about what's going to happen in the future, if you're resentful about what's happened in the past, you're not getting the full benefit of the joy of life that's available in each new present moment. So he goes on and says, we try not to lose ourselves in dispersion. We try not to be carried away by regrets about the past, or worries about the future, or craving, or anger, or jealousy in the present moment. We will practice mindful breathing to come back to what is happening in the present moment. We are determined to learn the art of mindful living by touching the wondrous, refreshing, and healing elements that are inside and around us. And we're determined to learn the art of mindful living by nourishing seeds of joy, peace, love, and understanding within ourselves. In that way, we will be facilitating the work of transformation and healing in our consciousness. The mindfulness training is in the middle. It is the heart of the 14 mindfulness trainings. The most important one, quote, to live in awareness, close quotes. Without this training, without mindfulness, the other mindfulness trainings cannot be observed completely. It's like a carrying pole. In Asia, they used to carry things with a pole and put the middle of the pole on their shoulders. This training is the middle of the pole that you carry on your shoulders. Everything else is easier or only possible to do when you're doing the middle piece. And that's the mindfulness training. That's the 7th mindfulness training is, and I'm going to read it again, quote, being aware that life is available only in the present moment, and that it is possible to live happily only in the here and now. Because of that awareness, we are committed to training ourselves to live deeply each moment of daily life. Now, here's a sidebar. What does that mean? How do you do that? Most people don't have any idea what that means, especially from the Western world, because they've been raised in a world of distraction and advertising and, oh, look at a shiny bauble. Oh, look, a squirrel. Oh, look, another shiny bauble. The Way of Mastery says, we have perfected the art of being distracted. And when it comes to the ways of the keys to the kingdom in Lesson 5, it says, we've made an art of being distracted. We say we want to get a degree, and we're supposed to be in a class, and somebody comes along and says, hey, how about going to a movie? And next thing you know, we're in the movie theater instead of the class. And so, in the Way of Mastery, it says we cultivate the art of intention, to be able to keep our focus on that which we truly value. It's the same thing here. Well, how do you train yourself to do that? It's not something you can train from the positive perspective. It's just something that, since it's like the word love, what's love? There are no words to describe love adequately. So what they do is they talk about what love is not. Love doesn't judge. Love doesn't have jealousy. Love doesn't have bitterness or hurt or resentment. Love allows all things, accepts all things, embraces all things. Yeah, but what is love? We don't know. I can't tell you what love is, but here's how it works and what it isn't. So how do you develop mindfulness? Well, the biggest part of developing mindfulness is to wake up to become aware of when you're distracted, and then gently return your focus to what you wanted to pay attention to. So it's awakening to all of the ways that I distract myself, or that I hurry, or that I judge, or that I judge others, or I judge myself negatively. And I just wake up, and as Pema Chodron would talk to us about in her work, I would just say, oh, judging. I just label it lightheartedly, with curiosity, with compassion. Oh, there I go thinking again. Oh, there I go raging again. Oh. And as soon as I'm awake to what I'm doing, and I recognize that this is not what I had intended, it's easier to shift out of it. So we notice when we have lost ourselves in dispersion. We notice when we've been carried away by regrets, either regrets about the past or worries about the future. We start to look for and notice when we have the energy of craving come up in us, or the energy of anger, or the energy of jealousy, and we just choose differently in that moment. We say, oh, this is what I've done dozens, if not hundreds of times, and I've never really liked the results, so I choose differently in this next moment. Which is why Diederik Wolzak chose the phrase, choose again, for the title of his book and the core of his process. He goes on and says, we will practice mindful breathing to assist us in coming back to what is happening in the present moment. There's a practice of breathing. There's a practice of mindful walking. There's a practice of meditation. We will practice that when we become aware that we've been distracted by regrets about the past or worries about the future or craving or anger or jealousy. And in that practice, we come back into mindful living, which gives us a chance to touch into the wondrous, refreshing, healing elements that are always inside and all around us. And we'll take that next step by nourishing the seeds of joy, peace, love, and understanding, and those seeds are inside us. And as we do that, we facilitate the work of transformation and the work of healing in our consciousness. This mindfulness training is in the middle. You might call it the glue that holds everything together. You might call it the lever that gives you the leverage to affect change in the processes that you experience internally. As in the middle of these 14, number 7, it is the most important one. It's in the moment. The goal is to live in awareness in each moment. The 8th mindfulness training reads as follows, quote, aware that the lack of communication always brings separation and suffering, we are committed to training ourselves in the practice of compassionate listening and loving speech. We will learn to listen deeply in openness, in allowance, without judging, without reacting, and we will refrain from uttering words that can create discord or cause the community to break. We will make every effort to keep communications open and to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. He goes on and says, we now come to the second set of mindfulness trainings. This concerns speech. The first 7 trainings deal with the mind, then 2 with speech and 5 with body. This mindfulness training is about reconciliation, the effort to make peace, not only in our family, but in society as well. In order to help reconcile a conflict, we have to be in touch with both sides. We must transcend the conflict. If we are still in the conflict, it's difficult to reconcile. We have to have a non-dualistic viewpoint in order to listen to both sides and understand. The world needs people like this for the work of reconciliation, people with the capacity of understanding and compassion. So as I'm reading that, my mind is telling me something about the Socratic method. Now, Socrates and the Socratic method, if you're not aware of that term, Socratic method, if you're not aware of who Socrates is, please look it up for yourself. But as it came down to me, the Socratic method was oversimplified, and it was summarized as simply a process of asking leading questions to guide the student to the appropriate answer. And I don't know what form of distortion from individuals or the culture led to that. But for years, that's all I heard about was the Socratic method, was this oversimplified statement about leading a learning for students by simply asking them questions that keep prompting them to do their own inner exploration to be able to arrive at the truth for themselves. Not too many years ago, I discovered that the original Socratic method was based on first doing this 8th mindfulness training. Find a way to deeply, completely understand the other person's position before you decide that you're going to start asking them questions to lead them to, quote, the truth, close quotes. The core of the work, the harder thing, is to literally do this compassionate listening, radical inquiry, be focused on helping the other person teach you about their perspective and their position and their motivations. And once you understand those deeply, then you can start asking questions that, if the other person is willing to explore those questions openly and honestly, might lead them to a deeper truth, a deeper realization of capital T-R-U-T-H, the truth, what actually is, not what I think about it, not what I judge to be right, but just what is. So this 8th mindfulness training says, because we are aware that a lack of communication always brings separation and suffering, and we're all about trying to recognize suffering and find ways to bring an end to suffering. That's what the Buddhist teachings are about. Because of that, we are committed to training ourselves to listen deeply without judging or reacting. In other words, to listen deeply with allowance and acceptance and openness. And we're committed to refraining from uttering words that can create discord or cause the community to break. We will make every effort to keep communications open and to reconcile and resolve all conflicts, however small. Now, if you've been around the Dr. Michael Ryce work very long, you've probably heard the tool of the commitment. And one of the lines in the commitment says, I promise to keep communication open, to be here with you, to keep communication open, and work with you to heal and grow together. The same kind of understanding about the need for connection and the need for understanding is woven into these ancient Buddhist practices. So, the 9th mindfulness training reads as follows, quote, being aware that words can create suffering or happiness, we are committed to learning to speak truthfully and constructively, using only words that inspire hope and confidence. We are determined not to say hurtful things for the sake of personal interest or to impress people, nor to utter words that might cause division or hatred. We will not spread news that we do not know to be certain, nor will we criticize or condemn things of which we are not sure. We will do our best to speak out about situations of injustice, even when doing so may threaten our own safety. The words we speak can create love, trust, and happiness around us, or create a hell. We should be careful what we say. If we tend to talk too much, we should become aware of it and learn to speak less. we must become aware of our speech and the results of our speaking. There is a gatha that can be recited before picking up the telephone, as follows, quote, "Words can travel across thousands of miles. My words may create mutual understanding and love. May my words," I'm asking for the powers that be to help me make my words create mutual understanding and love. May they be as beautiful as gems, as lovely as flowers. We should speak constructively. In our speech, we can try not to cause misunderstanding, hatred, or jealousy, but rather we can try to increase understanding and mutual acceptance. This may even help reduce our telephone bills. The 9th mindfulness training also requires frankness and courage. How many of us are brave enough to denounce injustice in a situation in which speaking the truth might threaten our own safety? Well, just to refresh your memory, or if you're just picking up on this, this is written by Thich Nhat Hanh, who was Vietnamese, and it was written during the time of the Vietnam War when he and his brothers and sisters, fellow monks, fellow Buddhists, were speaking up about the violence and the injustice and the hatred, and paying dearly for it, many of them with their lives. And so he knows from his own experience, it's not easy to speak truth to power, especially when you either fear or it's absolutely true that your own safety might be threatened. And yet that's what we're called to do in the 8th and 9th mindfulness trainings, because we're aware that communication always improves good, loving, compassionate communication, improves connection and community, and lack of communication always brings separation and suffering. We are committed to training ourselves in the practice of compassionate listening and loving speech. And here's the gatha that's recommended before getting on a phone call. Here is a little mantra, a little meditation you could recite before picking up the phone or engaging anyone in a conversation. Quote, "Words can travel across thousands of miles. May my words create mutual understanding and love. May they be as beautiful as gems, as lovely as flowers." So again, we're about halfway through our first hour today. I want to extend the invitation to anyone who's listening to either download the app and chime in with a comment, or hit the phone icon and initiate a call. Again, to do that, you need to download the Needle app from your app store, NEDL-AI for Radio Tuner. And Doug says he's absolutely loving this, so thank you, Doug. And we'll just continue. The 10th mindfulness training from Thich Nhat Hanh and his book, Being Peace, is as follows. Aware that the essence and the aim of Sangha is the practice of understanding and compassion, we are determined not to use the Buddhist community for personal gain or profit, or to transform our community into a political instrument. A spiritual community should, however, take a clear stand against oppression and injustice, and should strive to change the situation without engaging in partisan conflicts. This does not mean that we must be silent about injustice. It just means that we should do it with awareness and not take sides. We should speak the truth and not just weigh the political consequences. If we take sides, we lose our power to help mediate the conflict. He writes, during one visit to America, I met with a group of people who wanted to raise funds to help the government of Vietnam rebuild the country. I asked whether they would also like to do something for the boat people, and they said no. They thought that politically it is not good to talk about the boat people, because that would discredit the government of Vietnam. In order to succeed in one thing, they have to refrain from doing something that they think is right. And of course, that doesn't fit with the Buddhist way that we're just reading about. That would be giving in to allowing something unjust to continue because of the political benefit. So the 10th mindfulness training is, because we're aware that the essence and the aim of this practice is the practice of understanding and compassion, we're determined to stay out of the politics and to speak up for what is right, whether it costs us dearly or not, and to stay out of partisan conflicts, to quit taking sides, and to look at the humanity in any situation and work to end suffering from any side, from any perspective, any way we can. The 11th mindfulness training reads as follows. Aware that great violence and injustice have been done to our environment and society, we are committed to not live with a vocation that is harmful to humans and nature. We will do our best to select a livelihood that helps realize our ideal of understanding and compassion. We are aware of global economic, political, and social realities, and we will behave responsibly as consumers and as citizens, not investing in companies that deprive others of their chance to live. This is an extremely hard training to observe. If you're lucky enough to have a vocation that helps you realize your ideal of compassion, you still have to understand more deeply. If I'm a teacher, I'm very glad to have this job helping children. I'm glad that I am not a butcher who kills cows and pigs. Yet the son and the daughter of the butcher come to my class, and I teach them. They profit from my right livelihood. My son and daughter eat the meat the butcher prepares. We are linked together. I cannot say that my livelihood is perfectly right. It cannot be. Observing this mindfulness training includes finding ways to realize a collective right livelihood. You may try to follow a vegetarian diet to lessen the killing of animals, but you cannot completely avoid the killing. When you drink a glass of water, you may kill tiny living beings. Even in your dish of vegetables, there are quite a lot of them, boiled or fried. I am aware that my vegetarian dish is not completely vegetarian, and I think that if my teacher, the Buddha, were here, he could not avoid that either. The problem is whether we are determined to go in the direction of compassion or not. If we are, then we can reduce the suffering to a minimum. If I lose my direction, I have to look for the North Star and go to the north. That does not mean I expect to arrive at the North Star. I just want to go in that direction. So this mindfulness training, the 11th one, recognizes that none of us is perfect. None of us can adhere to every principle that we desire to achieve in every moment, and yet we keep working in the direction that's in alignment with our principles and values. The 12th mindfulness training reads, aware that much suffering is caused by war and conflict, we are determined to cultivate nonviolence, understanding, and compassion in our daily lives. We are determined to promote peace and education, peace education. We are determined to promote mindful meditation and reconciliation within families, communities, nations, and in the world. We are determined not to kill and not to let others kill. We will diligently practice deep looking with our Sangha to discover better ways to protect life and prevent war. He goes on and writes, the defense budgets in Western countries are still enormous. Studies show that by stopping the arms race, we will have more than enough money to erase poverty, hunger, illiteracy, and many other diseases from the world. This mindfulness training applies not only to humans, but to all living beings. As we have seen, no one can observe this training to perfection. However, the essence is to respect and protect life, to do our best to protect life. This means not killing and also not letting other people kill. It is difficult. Those who try to observe this training have to be working for peace in order to have peace in themselves. Preventing war is much better than protesting against the war. Protesting the war is too late. Now, there are other teachings that would say, in order to work for peace, you must first have peace within yourself. And he writes here the opposite of that. Those who try to observe this training to have peace, well, I guess I misread it. He is saying the very same thing. Those who try to observe this training first have to have peace within themselves. They have to be working towards the peace within themselves in order to be able to bring about peace in the world. The 13th mindfulness training reads, being aware of the suffering caused by exploitation, social injustice, stealing, and oppression, we are committed to cultivating loving kindness and learning ways to work for the well-being of people, animals, plants, and minerals. We will practice generosity by sharing our time, energy, and material resources with those who are in need. We are determined not to steal and not to possess anything that should belong to others. We will respect the property of others, but will try to prevent others from profiting from human suffering or the suffering of other beings. Bringing to our awareness the pain caused by social injustice, the 13th mindfulness training urges us to work for a more livable society. This training is linked with the 4th mindfulness training that talks about the awareness of suffering, and the 5th mindfulness training, which is lifestyle. Also, the 11th mindfulness training of right livelihood, and the 12th mindfulness training, the protection of life. In order to deeply comprehend this training, we must also meditate on the other 4 mindfulness trainings listed here. To develop ways to prevent others from profiting from human suffering and the suffering of other beings, this is the duty of legislators and politicians. However, each of us can also act in this direction. To some degree, we can be close to oppressed people and help them protect their right to life and defend themselves against oppression and exploitation. Letting people profit from human suffering or the suffering of other beings is something we cannot do. As a community, we must try to prevent this. How to work for justice in our own city is a problem we have to consider. the Bodhisattva's vows to help all sentient beings, and these are immense. Each of us can vow to sit in their rescue boats. The 14th mindfulness training. And it says here in parentheses, for lay members, quote, aware that sexual relations motivated by craving cannot dissipate the feeling of loneliness, but will create more suffering, frustration, and isolation, we are determined not to engage in sexual relations without mutual understanding, love, and a long-term commitment. In sexual relations, we must be aware of future suffering that may be caused. We know that to preserve the happiness of ourselves and others, we must respect the rights and commitments of ourselves and others. We will do everything in our power to protect children from sexual abuse and to protect couples and families from being broken by sexual misconduct. We will treat our bodies with respect and preserve our vital energies, the sexual energy, the breath, and the spirit. We will preserve them for the realization of our bodhisattva ideal. We will be fully aware of the responsibility of bringing new lives into the world, and will meditate on the world into which we are bringing these new beings. And here's this 14th mindfulness training for the monastic members. Quote, aware that the aspiration of a monk or a nun can only be realized when he or she wholly, totally leaves behind the bonds of worldly love, we are committed to practicing chastity and to helping others protect themselves. We are aware that loneliness and suffering cannot be alleviated by the coming together of two bodies in a sexual relationship, but the practice of true understanding and compassion can alleviate the loneliness. We know that a sexual relationship will destroy our life as a monk or a nun. It will prevent us from realizing our ideal of serving living beings and will harm others. We're determined not to suppress or mistreat our body or to look upon our body only as an instrument, but to learn to handle our body with respect. We are determined to preserve vital energies such as sexual, breath, and spirit for the realization of our bodhisattva ideal. He goes on to write, you may have the impression that this mindfulness training discourages having children, but it is not so. It only urges us to be aware of what we are doing. Is our world safe enough to bring in more children? If you want to bring more children in the world, then do something for the world. This training also has to do with celibacy. Traditionally, Buddhist monks were celibate for at least 3 reasons. The first is that the monks in the time of the Buddha were urged to practice meditation for most of the day. They had to be in contact with the people in the village in order to teach them the Dharma, and in order to ask for some food for the day. If a monk had to support a family, he would not be able to perform his duties as a monk. The second reason is that sexual energy had to be preserved for meditation. In the religious and medical traditions of Asia, the human person was said to have 3 sources of energy: sexual, breath, and spirit. Sexual energy is what you spend during sexual intercourse. Breath energy is the kind of energy you spend when you talk too much and breathe too little. Spirit energy is energy that you spend when you worry too much and do not sleep well. If you spend these 3 sources of energy, your body will not be strong enough to penetrate deeply into reality and realize the way. Buddhist monks observed celibacy not because of moral admonition, but they did it to conserve energy. Someone on a long fast knows how important it is to preserve these three sources of energy. The third reason the Buddhist monks observe celibacy is the question of suffering. Even today, if we go to India, we see many children without food and many children sick without medicine. One woman can give birth to 10, 12 children without being able to feed 2 or 3 properly. The existence of suffering is the first truth in Buddhism. To bring a child into the world is a great responsibility. If you are wealthy, maybe you can do it with no problem. However, if you are poor, this is a real concern. To be reborn means first to be reborn in your children. Your children are a continuation of yourself. You are reborn in them, and you continue the cycle of suffering. We are aware that having more children in society, I'm going to read that again. Aware that having more children in the society of his day would be to make them suffer, the Buddha urged the monks not to have children. I think that during the past 2,500 years, Buddhist monks in many countries have helped curb the death rate. I misread that. Help curb the birth rate. And he says this is quite important. In summary, he writes, the 14 Mindfulness Trainings urge us to respect our own body and to maintain our energy for the realization of the way. Not only meditation, but any efforts that are required to change the world require energy. You, we, I should take good care of ourselves. He writes, in my opinion, the liberation of sexual behavior in the West has caused a number of good results and has also caused some problems. The liberation of women, because of modern birth control methods, has been something very real. In the past, young girls in Asia as well as Europe had enormous problems, and some even committed suicide when they became pregnant. Since the discovery of birth control, these kinds of tragedies have lessened considerably. However, the liberation of sexual behavior has also caused much stress and much trouble. I think the fact that many people suffer from depression is partly because of that. Please meditate on this problem. It is an important problem for Western society. If you wish to have children, please do something for the world you will bring them into. That will make you someone who works for peace in one way or another. That's the end of the 6th chapter or lesson and the 14 mindfulness trainings. So we've got about 10 minutes for a comment or a question or an answer or a testimonial or a soliloquy. And my mind almost recited the call-in number, but there isn't a call-in number. We're on Needle Radio, and if you download the app from your app store, NEDL, AI Tuner for Radio, and sign in, you can type in a comment or touch the phone icon and talk to us directly. And we're wide open for the next 5 or 10 minutes to take calls. I've been having a number of different conversations with people recently where the core focus of the conversation is, how do I shift away from blame and closer to 100% responsibility for whatever emotion or internal experience that I'm creating? Boiled down to one important lesson, that would be it. Find a way to work to become more and more responsible, moment to moment, for everything you experience internally. Every sadness, every anger, every hurt. And I deal with people that are going through very real things. You know, people who are in marriages and they find out their spouse cheated on them. People who have family members that contract cancer and it's going to be fatal. I deal with people who have lost their jobs. I deal with people who are, being threatened by the political changes in our culture recently. And the hardest part for me is to help them understand that learning to shift away from blame into 100% responsibility for what they're experiencing is not the same as blaming themselves for what they're experiencing. Blame has nothing to do with it. Responsibility is a tool I can pick up that allows me the ability to respond differently the next time a similar situation arises. And the only mechanism that allows me to do that is if I'm awake and aware of what was my part in the experience that I just had. I was talking to somebody earlier today about a situation that happened when I was trying to expand access to these tools. And I hired a business coach who said he also had a publication in business, and it was all these big plans. And I thought I had done enough due diligence, and I agreed and started sending him money and meeting with him in video calls and traveling to my part in creating that interaction and the final result, then I couldn't learn any lessons from it, and I would have been, wallowing in misery, perhaps even to this day. And yet, here we are 6 years later, and I'm completely okay with what happened and the lessons I've learned from it, and very certain that I won't make the similar mistakes again. And because I'm not wallowing in the negative emotions, I'm able to maximize the positives, pick up the pieces that were positive from that, and continue to use them to my benefit and the benefit of others. So that's the toughest single thing. Helping people understand that they can step into 100% responsibility for everything they experience and every emotion they create within themselves without moving into blame of self. Hoping that makes sense, hoping that you will find a way to access the tools on whyagain.org, WHYAGAIN.org, and or the app you can download from your app store by typing in the 3 words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness. Aramaic is ARAMAIC. And start using the app, using the reality management worksheet anytime you find yourself experiencing a negative emotion. And I mean anything from confusion to hurt to sadness to grief to anger to bitterness to resentment to rage, anything, whether it's a light little emotion that you experience as a negative irritation or it's an overwhelming feeling of hurt or confusion or overwhelm itself. That tool has been the core tool that's helped me transform my experience of life in the last 20 years, and it's available free. And if you go to whyagain.org and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, the next page you land on will have a whole host of audio files you can download that can serve as a tutorial for you to how to get maximum benefit from that tool. The tool's right there to download as a PDF, or you can put the app on your phone for free. But then these audio files are there of recordings of people who've called in the internet show and been stepped through the worksheet process. So it's like a how-to. It's like a tutorial that's available for free and multiple listenings, and we are quite hopeful that you'll take advantage of that and that you'll benefit from it, and then share it with others. Because as Michael Ryce would say, his hope is to get these tools into the hands of every mind, heart, and being on the planet, but he's pretty sure that he and his wife Jeannie are not going to have face-to-face connections with 8 billion people. So the more it gets spread around, the better. And so I'll just remind everyone that we're going to end this first hour, and there'll be just a couple minutes of break, and then Michael and Jeannie will start their second hour. You'll have to restart the Needle app when you get that notification. I'll be back again tomorrow and Friday, and I'll remind us all that we come from love. We're made of the stuff that we call love. We actually are love, and everything else is false. Blessings.